Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is WireDogSec back with another video for you guys. Today's video, we are going to continue on with the offensive security learning path. This is the breaching Active Directory room. It says this network covers techniques and tools that can be used to acquire that first set of AD credentials that can be used to enumerate AD. Well, let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, task 1, Introduction to AD Breaches. Active Directory, also known as AD for short, is used by approximately 90% of the global Fortune 1000 companies. If an organization's estate uses Microsoft Windows, you are almost guaranteed to find AD. Microsoft AD is the dominant suite used to manage Windows domains networks. However, since AD is used for identity and access management of the entire estate, it holds the keys to the kingdom, making it a very likely target for attackers. For more in-depth understanding of AD and how it works, please complete this room on AD Basics first. So go ahead and do AD Basics first and then come back here if you haven't done it yet. Breaching Active Directory. Before we can exploit Active Directory misconfigurations for privilege escalation, lateral movement, and goal execution, you need initial access first. You need to acquire an initial set of valid AD credentials. Due to the number of AD services and features, the attack surface for gaining an initial set of AD credentials is usually significant. In this room, we will discuss several avenues, but this is by no means an exhaustive list. When looking for the first set of credentials, we don't focus on the permissions associated with the account. Thus, even a low privileged account would be sufficient. We are just looking for a way to authenticate to AD, allowing us to further enumerate AD itself. All right, it says learning objectives. In this network, we will cover several methods that can be used to breach AD. This is by no means a complete list, as new methods and techniques are discovered every day. However, we will cover the following techniques to recover AD credentials in this network: Ntlm authenticated services, Ldap bind credentials, authentication relays, Microsoft deployment toolkit, configuration files. We can use these techniques on a security assessment either by targeting systems of an organization that are internet facing or by implanting a rogue device on the organization's network. Connect to the network attack box. I'm not using the attack box. I tried using this earlier and I was running into all kinds of issues, so I'm going to use my own Kali machine. As you can see on the right side here, I have it spun up already and ready to go. All right, so if you're going to use the attack box, just follow these directions here on how to properly configure that. All right, I'm going to skip through this part here. Other hosts, this is if you're going to use your own VM like I'm using, as you can see on the right side here. All right, I've already done this. I already have the file downloaded for OpenVPN. I'm already connected to the environment. As you can see there, I did NS lookup. All right, it seems to be working fine, but we'll find out as we progress throughout the room. It just tells you how to use OpenVPN, stuff like that. So I'm going to skip through all of this here. It says it's important to make sure your DNS is configured correctly. If it's not, then maybe some of these things won't work inside this room. All right, if you're using Kali, here's instructions here on how to set that up. I've already gone through the steps listed here. And if you're running into issues, this is how to debug DNS. You may have to do etc host file entry, manual entry inside there to get it working properly. And then you can follow some other steps down here to see if it's working as it's supposed to be. And that's pretty much it. All right, so answer the questions below. I've completed the AD basics room, ready to learn about AD breaching techniques. I've connected to the environment, configured DNS. Okay. And task number 2, Osint and phishing. Let's see what they have for us here. Says two popular methods for gaining access to that first set of AD credentials is open source intelligence, Osint, and phishing. We will only briefly mention the two methods here as they are already covered more in depth in other rooms. Osint. Osint is used to discover information that has been publicly disclosed. In terms of AD credentials, this can happen for several reasons, such as the following here. Users who ask questions on public forums, such as Stack Overflow, but disclose sensitive information, such as their credentials in the question. Developers that upload scripts to services such as GitHub with credentials hard-coded. Credentials being discovered in past breaches since employees used their work accounts to sign up for other external websites. Websites such as Have I Been Pwned and Dehashed provide excellent platforms to determine if someone's information, such as work email, was ever involved in a publicly known data breach. By using OSINT techniques, it will be possible to recover publicly disclosed credentials If we're lucky enough to find credentials, we will need to find a way to test whether they are valid or not, since Osint information can be outdated. In task 3, we will talk about Ntlm authentication or authenticated services, which may provide an excellent avenue to test credentials to see if they are still valid. A detailed room on Red Team Osint can be found here, so check that out if you're interested. Phishing. Phishing is another excellent method to breach AD. Phishing usually entices users to either provide their credentials on a malicious web page or ask them to run a specific application that would install a remote access Trojan, also known as a rat. In the background, this is a prevalent method since the rat would execute in the user's context, immediately allowing you to impersonate that user's AD account. This is why phishing is such a big topic for both red and blue teams. A detailed room on phishing can be found here, so check that out if you're interested. I understand OSINT, how it can be used to breach AD. Yes. I understand phishing, how it can be used to breach AD. Yes. What popular website can be used to verify email addresses or passwords has ever been exposed, publicly disclosed, breached? Remember that was have I been pwned? Have I been pwned? It's spelled like that. Yep. All right. Task number 3. We're going to talk about Ntlm authenticated services. Ntlm and Ntlm. New Technology Land Manager Ntlm is the suite of security protocols used to authenticate users' identities in AD. Ntlm can be used for authentication by using a challenge response based scheme called Ntlm. This authentication mechanism is heavily used by the services on a server. However, services that use Ntlm can be exposed to the internet. The following are some of the popular examples: internally hosted exchange mail servers that expose an Alec web app OWA login portal, remote desktop protocol RDP service of a server being exposed to the internet, which you should never have this exposed to the internet unless it's very, very restricted down to a specific IP address or domain, what have you. All right, you don't want this open to the internet to everybody because that's how organizations can get breached. All right, continuing on. Exposed VPN endpoints that were integrated with AD, web applications that are internet facing and make use of NetNTLM. NetNTLM, also often referred to as Windows authentication or just NTLM authentication, allows the application to play the role of the middleman between the client and AD. All authentication material is forwarded to a domain controller in the form of a challenge, and if successfully completed, the application will authenticate to the user or authenticate the user. This means that the application is authenticating on behalf of the user and not authenticating the user directly on the application itself. This prevents the application from storing AD credentials, which should only be stored on a domain controller. This process is shown in the diagram below. All right, so be sure to read and understand this here. All right, you got user request access, server sends challenge, client sends response, server sends DC's response. Oh, sorry, client sends response, and then server sends challenge in response to DC. DC compares challenge and response for authentication, and then server sends DC response. Brute force login attacks. As mentioned in Task 2, these exposed services provide an excellent location to test credentials discovered using other means. However, these services can also be used directly in an attempt to recover an initial set of valid AD credentials. We could perhaps try to use these for brute force attacks if we recovered information such as valid email addresses during our initial red team recon. Since most AD environments have account lockout configured, we won't be able to run a full brute force attack. Instead, we need to perform a password sparing attack instead of trying multiple password or different passwords, which may trigger the account lockout mechanism. We choose and use one password in an attempt to authenticate with all the usernames we have copied or acquired. However, it should be noted that these types of attacks can be detected due to the amount of failed authentication attempts they will generate. You have been provided with a list of usernames discovered during a red team OSINT exercise. The OSINT exercise also indicated the organization's initial onboarding password, which seems to be changeme123. Although users should always change their initial password, we know that users often forget. We will be using a custom developed script to stage a password spring against the web application hosted at this URL here, this ntlm auth.za.tryhacme.com. navigating to the URL, we can see that it prompts for Windows authentication credentials. All right, so I already have that pulled up over here. And it says here, Firefox Windows authentication plugin is incredibly prone to failure. If you want to test credentials manually, Chrome is recommended. Okay, well, maybe we'll have to switch. Let's see what it does first. We could use tools such as Hydra to assist with the password sparing attack. However, it is often better to script up these types of attacks yourself, which allows you more control over the process. A base Python script has been provided in the task files that can be used for the password sparing attack. The following function is the main component of the script. So you can go ahead and read through this. I'm not going to go through it here, but be sure to check this out. All right. I already have the files on this box as well. All right, so let me go ahead and clear all this stuff out of here. Do a ls, and this should be it here. All right, let's go ahead and continue. This function takes our suggested password and URL that we are targeting as input and attempts to authenticate to the URL with each username in the text file. By monitoring the differences in HTTP response codes from the application, we can determine if the credential pair is valid or not. If the credential pair is valid, the application would respond with a 200 HTTP OK code. If the pair is invalid, the application will return a 401 HTTP unauthorized code. Password spraying. If you are using the attack box, the password spraying script and usernames text file is provided under the root rooms breaching AD task 3 directory. We can run the script using the following command, which is this here, Python Ntlm underscore password spray, etc., etc. We provide the following values for each of the parameters: user file, text file containing our usernames.txt, fully qualified domain name, password, and attack URL. Using these parameters, we should get a few valid credentials pairs from our password spraying attack. So I'm just going to copy and paste this over like so. Okay, let me go ahead and clear all this stuff out of here and then paste this. Hit enter, and it's starting to fire off. Now, while that's running, let's continue. Using a combination of Osint and Ntlm password spraying, we now have our first valid credential pairs that could be used to enumerate 80 further. Answer the questions. What is the name of the challenge response authentication mechanism that Ntlm uses? And that was, sorry, let's see what that was. Yeah, Ntlm. All right, this is going to be Ntlm. What is the username of the third valid credential pair found by the password spraying script? All right, so let's see here. We got, let's see, valid 1, 2, and 3. It's like Gordon Stevens, and then passwords change me 1, 2, 3. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Gordon dot Stevens. How many valid credential pairs were found? All right, so Gordon Stevens was 3, and then we got 4. So it looks like 4 is going to be answered for this one. What is the message displayed by the web application when authenticating with a valid credential pair? Well, let's go ahead and see what it has. All right, so let me go jump back over here to Firefox. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Gordon dot Stevens, and it was change me 1, 2, 3. Okay, it says hello world. All right, so I'm assuming that's the answer. All right, and let's go ahead and continue to task number 4, Ldap bind credentials. Let's see what they have here. And let's go ahead and take a look. Ldap. Another method of AD authentication that applications can use is lightweight directory access protocol, Ldap authentication. Ldap authentication is similar to Ntlm authentication. However, with Ldap authentication, the application directly verifies the user's credentials. The application has a pair of AD credentials that it can use first to query Ldap and then verify the AD user's credentials. Ldap authentication is a popular mechanism with third-party non-Microsoft applications that integrate with AD. These include applications and systems such as GitLab, Jenkins, custom-developed web applications, printers, VPNs. If any of these applications or services are exposed on the internet, the same type of attacks as those leveraged against Ntlm authenticated systems can be used. However, since a service using Ldap requires a set of AD credentials, it opens up additional attack avenues. In essence, we can attempt to recover the AD credentials used by the service to gain authenticated access to AD. The process of authentication through Ldap is shown below, and this is what it looks like here. All right, you got user sends printing requests with AD username and password. Printer uses its AD credentials to create an Ldap bind request. DC provides bind response. Printer requests Ldap user search response. Ldap bind request with user credentials. Server sends bind response, and then user is authenticated and print job is accepted. If you could gain a foothold on the correct host, such as a GitLab server, it might be as simple as reading the configuration files to recover these AD credentials. These credentials are often stored in plain text and configuration files, since the security model relies on keeping the location and storage configuration file secure rather than its contents. Configuration files are covered in more depth in task number 7, Ldap bypass attacks. Ldap passback attacks. However, one other very interesting attack can be performed against Ldap authentication mechanisms called an Ldap passback attack. This is a common attack against network devices such as printers. When you have gained initial access to the internal environment or internal network, such as plugging in a rogue device in a boardroom, Ldap passback attacks can be performed when we gain access to a device's configuration where the Ldap parameters are specified. This can be, for example, the web interface of a network printer. Usually the credentials for these interfaces are kept to the default ones, such as admin or admin password. Here we won't be able to directly extract the Ldap credentials since the password is usually hidden. However, we can alter the Ldap configuration, such as the IP or hostname of the Ldap server. In an Ldap passback attack, we can modify this IP to our IP and then test the Ldap configuration, which will force the device to attempt Ldap authentication to our rogue device. We can intercept this authentication attempt to recover Ldap credentials, performing an Ldap passback. There's a network printer in this network where the administration website does not even require credentials. Navigate to the following link here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this like so, and then we'll navigate it with this one here. All right, so we got the settings page here, and it says using browser inspection. We can also verify the printer website was at least secure enough to not just send the LDAP password back to the browser. All right, so yeah, if we go ahead and see if view page source here. Okay, yeah, nothing there. All right, so we're gonna do the inspection. Where is that? There we go. All right, so there we go down here. And let's go ahead and close out of this. So we have the username, but not the password. However, when we press test settings, we can see that an authentication request is made to the domain controller to test the Ldap credentials. Let's try to exploit this to get the printer to connect to us instead, which would disclose the credentials. To do this, let's use a simple netcat listener to test if we can get the printer to connect to us. Since the default port of Ldap is 389, we can use the following command. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this over. So let's go back here and let's just do it this way here. Paste. Okay. Note that if you use the attack box, that you first disable SL APD using service SLAD PD stop. Then we can alter the server input blocks on the web application to point to our IP address and press test settings. Your IP will be the VPN IP and it will either be a 10.50 yada yada yada. You can use IPA to list interfaces, yada yada yada. Please make sure to note the interface of the IP since you will need it later in the task. Um, you should see that we get a connection back, but there's a slight problem. So let's go ahead and try this real quick. Let me go ahead and clear all this stuff out and see. All right, let's do IPA. All right, so let's go ahead and try this now. Now if we go back here, there we go. All right, we got something back. You may require more than one try to receive a connection back, but it should respond within 5 seconds. The supported capabilities response tells us we have a problem. Essentially, before the printer sends over the credentials, it is trying to negotiate the Ldap authentication method. Details, it will use this negotiation to select the most secure authentication method that both the printer and the Ldap server support. If the authentication method is too secure, the credentials will not be transmitted in clear text. With some authentication methods, the credentials will not be transmitted over the network at all. So we can't just use normal netcat to harvest the credentials. We need to create a rogue Ldap server and configure it insecurely to ensure the credentials are sent in plaintext. Hosting a rogue Ldap server. There are several ways to host a rogue Ldap server, but we will use OpenLDAP for this example. If you are using attack box, OpenLDAP is already installed. However, if you are using your own machine, you'll need to install it. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste this over to install it. All right, there we go. All right, now while that is installing, let's go ahead and continue. You will, however, have to configure your own rogue Ldap server on the attack box as well. We will start by reconfiguring the Ldap server using the following command here. So we'll have to wait until this is finished. So let's go ahead and skip forward. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Be sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. Once you subscribe, be sure to hit that notification bell. All right, so you know every time I post a new video. As you can see here, most people that view my videos, view my channel, are not subscribed. Now, if you do subscribe, it will help me get into the YouTube algorithm so that we can continue to grow our glorious community here. As always, thank you all for taking the time to watch. Have a nice day and enjoy the video. I have it installed. Let's go ahead and start configuring this bad boy. All right, it says select no for this, and then it says for the DNS name, use the following here. All right, which is going to be this here. Okay. And let's see, use the same for the organization's name as well. So let's do it again. All right, provide any administrative password, which I've already done. All right, it says select MDB as the Ldap database. Okay, it didn't show this here, but it says last two options sure the database is not purged or not removed when purged. So I'm gonna select no here. And it says move the old database files before a new one is created. Okay, select yes. If we're using the rogue Ldap server, we need to make it vulnerable by downgrading the supported authentication mechanisms. We want to ensure that our Ldap server only supports plain and login authentication methods. To do this, we need to create a new LDIF file called with the following content. Okay. So the file has the following properties. This OLC one here says specifies the SASL security properties, no anonymous disable mechanisms that support anonymous logon. Min SSF specifies the minimum acceptable security strength with 0, meaning no protection. Now we can use the LDIF file to patch our Ldap server using the following. So, okay, I guess we need to create this file real quick, and let's go ahead and do that. So let's do nano, and let's do this first. Copy this over like that. Okay, and then I'm gonna copy and paste this stuff over into it like that. Okay, and then yep, I want to save it. There we go. So it should be set to there. So now we can use LDIF file to patch our Ldap server using the following. So let's go ahead and do that. Copy and paste. Okay. Says we can verify that our rogue Ldap server's configuration has been applied using the following command. Note if you're using Kali, you may not receive any output. However, the configuration should have worked and you can continue to the next steps. So if we wanted to test it out, I guess we can do this here. Okay. But it looks like it was successful. Let's go ahead and just try it, I guess. All right. Um, well, let's continue and see. Capturing Ldap credentials and okay. Anyway, yeah. Our rogue Ldap server has now been configured. When we click the test settings at that same URL, the authentication will occur in clear text. If you configured your rogue Ldap server correctly and it is downgrading the communication, you will receive the following error. The distinguished name contains invalid syntax. If you receive this error, you can use a TCP dump to capture the credentials using the following command. All right, so let's go ahead and I guess they want us to test this out and see. Let's see. So it should occur in plain text. Um, all right, so let me go ahead and kill this, clear this out. All right, let me clear all this stuff out. And okay, now let's try it. Okay, now while we're waiting for stuff to show up there, let's see. Also note that the password 11 is an example. The password for your service will be different. You may have to press the test settings button a couple of times for the TCP dump. We'll return data since we are performing the attack over a VPN connection. Now we have another set of valid AD credentials by using Ldap passback attack and downgrading the supported authentication mechanism. We could intercept the credentials in clear text. What type of attack can be performed against Ldap authentication? Systems not commonly found. All right, now the answer to the first question is going to be the Ldap passback attack. All right, that's what we're exploring here. And it says, what two authentication mechanisms do we allow on our rogue Ldap server to downgrade the authentication? Make it clear text, login in plain. It's going to be the answer to that. What is the password associated with the SVC Ldap account? That's going to be TryHackMe Ldap pass1 @. As we can see here, all right, right there. Now let's continue on to task 5, authentication relays. And continuing with attacks that can be staged from our rogue device, we will now look at attacks against broader network authentication protocols. In Windows networks, there are a significant amount of services talking to each other, allowing users to make use of the services provided by the network. These services have to use built-in authentication methods to verify the identity of incoming connections. In task 2, we explored Ntlm authentication used on a web application. In this task, we will dive a bit deeper to look at how this authentication looks from the network's perspective. However, for this task, we will focus on net Ntlm authentication used by SMB. Server message block. The server message block SMB protocol allows clients like workstations to communicate with a server like a file share. And networks that use Microsoft AD, SMB governs everything from inter-network file sharing to remote administration. Even the out-of-paper alert on your computer receives when you try to print a document is the work of the SMB protocol. However, the security of earlier versions of the SMB protocol was deemed insufficient Several vulnerabilities and exploits were discovered that could be leveraged to recover credentials or even gain code execution on devices. Although some of these vulnerabilities were resolved in newer versions of the protocol, other organizations do not enforce the use of more recent versions since legacy systems do not support them. We'll be looking at two different exploits for Ntlm authentication with SMB. Since Ntlm challenges can be intercepted, we can use offline cracking techniques to recover the password associated with the Ntlm challenge. However, this cracking process is significantly slower than cracking net or Ntlm hash directly. We can use our rogue device to stage a man-in-the-middle attack, relaying the SMB authentication between the client and server, which we will um, provide us with an active authentication session and access to the target server, LLMNR, net or NBT-NS, and WPAD. In this task, we will take a bit of a look at the authentication that occurs during the use of SMB. We will use Responder to attempt to intercept the net Ntlm challenge to crack it. There are usually a lot of these challenges flying around on the network. Some security solutions even perform a sweep of entire IP ranges to recover information from hosts. Sometimes, due to stale DNS records, these authentication challenges can end up hitting your rogue device instead of the intended host. Responder allows us to perform man-in-the-middle attacks by poisoning the responses during net Ntlm authentication, tricking the client into talking to you instead of the actual server they wanted to connect to. On a real LAN, Responder will attempt to poison any link local multicast name resolution (LLMR), net BIOS name service (NBT), NS, and web proxy auto discovery (WPAD) requests that are detected. On large Windows networks, these protocols allow hosts to perform their own local DNS resolution for all hosts on the same local network, rather than overburdening network resources such as the DNS servers. Hosts can first attempt to determine host if the host they are looking for is on the same local network by sending out LLMNR request and seeing if any host responds. The NVT NS is the precursor protocol to LNMR, and WPAD requests are made to try and find a proxy for future HTTP or HTTPS connections. Since these protocols rely on requests broadcasted on the local network or rogue device would also receive these requests. Usually, these requests would simply be dropped since they were not meant for our host. However, Responder will actively listen to the request and send poison responses telling the requesting host that our IP is associated with the request host name. By poisoning these responses, or sorry, by poisoning these requests, Responder attempts to force the client to connect to our attack box. In the same line, it starts to host several servers such as SMB, HTTP, SQL, and other to capture these requests and force authentication, intercepting net Ntlm challenge. One thing to note is that Responder essentially tries to win the race condition by poisoning the connections to ensure that you intercept the connection. This means that Responder is usually limited to poisoning authentication challenges on the local network. Since we are connected via a VPN to the network, we will only be able to poison authentication challenges that occur on this VPN network. For this reason, we have simulated an authentication request that can be poisoned that runs every 30 minutes. This means that you may have to wait a bit before you can intercept the net Ntlm challenge in response. Other Responder would be able to intercept and poison more authentication requests when executed from our rogue device connected to the LAN of an organization. It is crucial to understand that this behavior can be disruptive and thus detected. By poisoning authentication requests, normal network authentication attempts would fail, meaning users and device or services will not be able to connect the host and shares they intend to. Do keep this in mind when using Responder on a security assessment. That's absolutely true. Make sure you don't cause a disruption when you're connecting security assessments. Responder has already been installed on Attack Box. However, if you're not using Attack Box, you can download and install it from here. We set Responder to run on the interface connected to the VPN. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this to get it ready to paste If you are using attack box, not all of the responder services will be able to start since other services are already using those ports. However, this will not impact this task. Responder will now listen for any LMNR, NBT, yada yada yada. Request coming in, we would leave responder to run a bit on a real LAN. However, in our case, we have to simulate this poisoning by having one of our servers attempt to authenticate two machines on the VPN. Leave responder running for a bit, average 10 minutes. Get some fresh air, and you should receive an SMB version 2 connection, which responder can use to entice and extract an Ntlm version 2-SSP response. It will look something like this. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and kill this and clear everything out and paste this over, fire it off. And now let's go ahead and sit back and wait. As you can see, everything's configured correctly. Turn on, on, on. So now we'll play the waiting game here. All right. And let's see here. If we're using our rogue device, we should probably run responder for quite some time, capturing several responses. Once we have a couple, we can start to perform some offline cracking of the responses in hopes of recovering their associated Ntlm passwords. If the accounts have weak passwords configured, we have a good chance of successfully cracking them. Copy the Ntlm version 2 SSP hash to a text file. We'll then use the password list provided in the downloadable files for this task and hashcat in an attempt to crack the hash using the following command, which is going to be this here. The password file has been provided for you on the attack box in this location here. We use hash type 5600, which corresponds with Ntlm version 2 SSP for hashcat. If you use your own machine, you have to install hashcat first. Any hashes that we can crack will now provide us with AD credentials for our breach. All right, so I'm gonna have to wait until this captures something, and then we'll continue on. All right, we're back, and it appears that we managed to capture this hash here. Now, before this, be sure to go ahead and stop that service that was running your rogue Ldap. I'm not sure if you need that to stop running or what, but I went ahead and disabled it or turned it off and started this back up. Now, I already have copied this hash over into a file called hashes.txt, and it's ready to go. All right, so I have my hashcat commands and options ready to go. So I'm gonna hit enter. So go ahead and run, and let's see if it finds the password. Now while that's running, let's go ahead and continue on relaying the challenge. In some instances, however, we can take this a step further by trying to relay the challenge instead of just capturing it directly. This is a bit more difficult to do without prior knowledge of the accounts, since this attack depends on the permissions of the associated account. We need a couple of things to play in our favor. It says SMB signing should either be disabled or enabled but not enforced. When we perform a relay, we make minor changes to the request to pass it along. If SMB signing is enabled, we won't be able to forge the message signature, meaning the server would reject it. The associated account needs the relevant permissions on the server to access the requested resources. Ideally, we are looking to relay the challenge in response of an account with administrative privileges over the server, as this would allow us to gain a foothold on the host. Since we technically don't yet have an AD foothold, some guesswork is involved into what accounts will have permissions on which host. If we have already breached AD, we could perform some initial enumeration first, which is usually the case. This is why blind relays are not usually popular. Ideally, you would first breach AD using another method and then perform enumeration to determine the privileges associated with the account you have compromised. From here, you can usually perform lateral movement for privilege escalation across the domain. However, it is still good to fundamentally understand how a relay attack works, as shown in the diagram below. All right, so user sends Ntlm negotiation or negotiate, which attacker intercepts with poisoning. Attacker forwards Ntlm authenticate on behalf of user. Server responds with Ntlm challenge. Attacker forwards challenge response. Server grants access This is attacker sends access denied error. And it says, oh, I skipped one, sorry. User sends challenge response created by encrypting challenge with user's hash, and then attacker forwards challenge response, server grants access, then attacker sends access denied error, and then attack accesses server resources. All right, if you want to try this type of attack in action, head over to the um, Holo network. We will also come back to this one in future AD rooms. What's the name of the tool we can use to poison and capture authentication requests? That's responder. We can answer some other questions here as well. So if we go back over here, it says, what's the account's name? Well, it's going to be this SVC file copy, like so. All right, and then we found the password as well. We can see it's F, capital P. All right, so FP, so F password 1, and then the exclamation mark. So let's go ahead and plug that in there. Task 6. Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. Large organizations need tools to deploy and manage the infrastructure of the estate. In massive organizations, you can't have your IT personnel using DVDs or even USB flash drives running around installing software on every single machine. Luckily, Microsoft already provides the tools required to manage the estate. However, we can exploit misconfigurations in these tools to also breach AD. MDT and SCCM. Microsoft Deployment Toolkit, MDT, is a Microsoft service that assists with automating the deployment of Microsoft operating systems, OS. Large organizations use services such as MDT to help deploy new images in their state more efficiently. Since the base images can be maintained and updated in a central location, usually MDT is integrated with Microsoft's System Center Configuration Manager, SCCM, which manages all updates for all Microsoft application services and operating systems. MDT is used for new deployments. Essentially, it allows the IT team to pre-configure and manage boot images. Hence, if they need to configure a new machine, they just need to plug in a network cable and everything happens automatically. They can make various changes to the boot image, such as already installing default software like Office 365 and the organization's antivirus of choice. It can also ensure that the new build is updated the first time the installation runs. SCCM can be seen as almost an expansion and the big brother to MDT. What happens to the software after it's installed? Well, SCCM does this type of patch management. It allows the IT team to review available updates to all software installed across the estate. The team can also test these patches in a sandbox environment to ensure they are stable before essentially deploying them to an all domain joined machines. It makes the life of the IT team significantly easier. However, anything that provides central management of infrastructure such as MDT and SCCM can also be targeted by attackers in an attempt to take over large portions of critical functions in the estate. Although MDT can be configured in various ways for this task, we will focus exclusively on a configuration called Pre-Boot Execution Environment, Pixie Boot. Pixie Boot. Large organizations use Pixie Boot to allow new devices that are connected to the network to load and install the OS directly over a network connection. MDT can be used to create, manage, and host Pixie Boot images. Pixie Boot is usually integrated with DHCP, which means that if DHCP assigns an IP lease, the host is allowed to request the Pixie Boot image and start the network OS installation process. The communication flow is in the diagram below, so you can go ahead and read through that yourself. All right, it's going to be using TFTP here. And once the process is performed, the client will use a TFTP connection to download the Pixie Boot image. We can exploit the Pixie Boot image for two different purposes. Inject a privilege escalation vector, such as local administrator account, to gain administrative access to the OS once the Pixie Boot has been completed. Perform password scraping attacks to recover AD credentials used during the install. In this task, we will focus on the latter. We will attempt to recover the deployment service accounts associated with the MDT service during installation for this password scraping attack. Furthermore, there's also the possibility of retrieving other AD attacks used for unattended installation of applications and services, Pixie boot image retrieval. Since DHCP is a bit finicky, we will bypass the initial steps of this attack. We will skip to the part where we attempt to request an IP and the Pixie boot pre-configure details from DHCP. We'll perform the rest of the attack from the step in the process manually. The first piece of information regarding the Pixie boot pre-configure you would have received via DHCP is the IP and the MDT server. In our case, you can recover that information from the TryHackMe network diagram. The second piece of information you would have received was the names of the BCD files. These files store the information relevant to Pixie boots for the different types of architecture. To retrieve this information, you need to connect to this website. It will list various BCD files, which I have right here in the background. All right, I'm already here. I'm just going to refresh this. Hopefully the network does not go to sleep on me again. But let's get back into it. Usually, you would use TFTP to request each of these BCD files and enumerate the configuration for all of them. However, in the interest of time, we'll focus on the BCD file of x64 architecture. Copy and store the full name of this file. For the rest of this exercise, you'll be using the name placeholder x64 yada 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 dot bcd. Since the files and their names are regenerated by MDT every day, each time you see the placeholder, remember to replace it with your specific BCD file name. Note as well that if the network has just started, these file names will only update after 10 minutes of the network being active. With the initial information now recovered from DHCP, wink wink, we can enumerate and retrieve the Pixie boot image. We will be using SSH connection on Ntlm jump 1 for the next couple of steps. So please authenticate using SSH, which you can see I'm already logged in. So to ensure that all users of the network can use SSH, start by creating a folder with your username and copying Power Pixie repo into this folder. So let's go ahead and do that, I guess. And let's see. So we need to cd into documents, make dir, and let's just do WireDogSec there. And then we need to copy this stuff over. So let's go ahead and do that here. Okay. And we're going to cd into there. Okay. All right. So it looks good. The first step we need to perform is using TFTP and downloading our BCD file to read the configuration of the MDT server. TFTP is a bit trickier than FTP since we can't list files. Instead, we send a file request and the server will connect back to us via UDP to transfer the file. Hence, we need to be accurate when specifying files and file paths. The BCP file are always located in the temp directory on the MDT server. We can initiate the TFTP transfer using the following command in our SSH session. So let's go ahead and try that. All right, so first things first, let's go and do the fill these placeholders in. All right, looks like it worked this time. I don't know what happened the first time. It gave me some kind of weird error. Anyway, it says you have to look up yada 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 in a lookup with the BCD file now recovered. We'll be using Power Pixie to read its contents. Power Pixie is a PowerShell script that automatically performs this type of attack, but usually with varying results. So it's best or better to perform a manual approach. We'll use the get WIM file function of Power Pixie to recover the locations of the Pixie boot image from the BCD file. And let's go ahead and do this here. All right, so looks good. And let's go ahead and copy and paste everything here. Okay. WIM files are bootable images in the Windows image format, WIM. Now that we have the location of the Pixie boot image, we can use the TFTP to download this image like so. So let's go ahead and do that. Get a little copy and paste with the IP address. And I think it was 10.200.4. I think it was 202. So let's go ahead and look real quick. Yeah, 202. All right. Now, while that is running, since this download will take a while, since you are downloading a fully bootable and configured Windows image, maybe stretch your legs and grab a glass of water while you wait. We're going to continue to read on. Recovering credentials from a Pixie boot image. Now that we have recovered the Pixie boot image, we can exfiltrate stored credentials. It should be noted that there are various attacks that we could stage. We could inject a local administrator user, so we have admin access. As soon as the image boots, we could install the image to have a domain join machine. If you are interested in learning more about these types of attacks, you can read this article here, so check that out if you're interested. This exercise will focus on a simple attack of just attempting to exfiltrate credentials. Again, we use the PowerPixie to recover the file or the credentials, but you could also do this step manually by extracting the image and looking for the bootstrap.ini file, where these types of credentials are often stored. To use Pixie or PowerPixie to recover the credentials from the bootstrap file, run the following command. So as soon as this gets done downloading, we can do that. Let's answer some questions. What Microsoft tool is used to create and host Pixie boot images in organizations? That's going to be Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. What network protocol is used for file recovery? Or is from MDT server? That's going to be TFTP. And we haven't gotten this far yet. So let's go ahead and pause the video and then come back once this finishes. Looks like it finished, so let's go ahead and run this here. And looks like it's going and doing its thing, and now it should recover the user ID and the password as soon as it finishes. All right, there we go. It looks like the user ID is going to be SVC MDT, and the password is going to be Pixie Boot Secure 1 at. So that's going to be answered to the last two here. What's the username and then what's the password? As well, you should make sure to clean up your user directory that you created at the start of the task. If you try, you will notice that you will get an access denied error. Don't worry, a script will help with the cleanup process. But remember, when you are doing assessments, to always perform cleanup. Very important here, folks. All right, task number 7, we're going to talk about configuration files. And let's see. The last enumeration avenue we will explore in this network is configuration files. Suppose you were lucky enough to cause a breach that gave you access to a host of the organization's network. In this case, configuration files are an excellent avenue to explore in an attempt to recover AD credentials depending on the host that was breached. Various configuration files may be of value for enumeration. Yeah, web application config files, service configuration files, registration keys, and centrally uh, deployed applications. All right, so let's continue on here. Several enumeration scripts, such as seatbelt, can be used to automate this process. Configuration file credentials. However, we will focus on recovering credentials from a centrally deployed application in this task. Usually these applications need a method to authenticate to the domain during both the installation and execution phases. An example of such an application is McAfee Enterprise Endpoint Security, which organizations can use as the endpoint detection and response tool for security. McAfee embeds the credentials used during installation to connect back to the orchestrator in a file called ma.db. This database file can be retrieved and read with local access to the host to recover the associated AD service count. We will be using SSH access on THP jump again. So let me flip back over to that tab. Which one did I have it over? There we go. Okay. The ma.db file is stored in a fixed location, which is here. So I'm going to copy and paste. Go ahead and clear all this stuff out. Okay. And let's see. Uh, yeah. Okay, so we need to do a dir on it. There we go. And I'm assuming we have to copy this file over to our attacker box. Yep, we're using a secure copy to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. Now make sure you're putting this onto your actual attacker box, okay? Otherwise, you're gonna run into some issues. All right. So make sure this is on your attacker box, not in the SSH session that you have going on the victim machine or the jump box. All right, so that's done. I have the file right there ready to go. Since to read the database file, we need to use a tool called SQL Browser. We can open the database using the following command. So let's go ahead and try that. And there we go. Using SQL Browser, we will select the Browse Data option and focus on the agent underscore repositories. So agent underscore repositories, okay? And looks like this one in particular they're taking a look at here. This McAfee HTTP and then the TryHackMe one. Okay. We are particularly interested in the second entry, focusing on the domain auth and auth underscore pass WD. Field entries make a note of the values stored in these entries. However, the auth pass WD field is encrypted. Luckily, McAfee encrypts this file with a known key. Therefore, we will use the following old Python 2 script to decrypt the password. The script has been provided as a downloadable task and it can be found here if you're using attack box. The tool here is quite old. It uses Python 2 and relies on an old crypto library. If you cannot get the script to work on your own VM, please make use of the attack box. However, there has been a recent update to the application to ensure that it works in Python 3 as well. You can download the latest version here. Alright, so if we go and take a look here. Uh, okay. And so this is the one we're supposed to take a look at, right? Okay. Let me see if I can actually move this over a little bit. Okay. All right. Wow, there's a lot of stuff in here. Okay. Let's go ahead and run this tool and see what we can do. So that's the first thing we need to do is do this. And let's go ahead and navigate back into this directory. It's called McAfee. There we go. All right, so there we go. And let's do, it says we're in Python 2, so let's try that first. Okay, let's see, you will have to unzip the McAfee site password encryption file, which I've already done. By providing a script with our base64 encoded and encrypted password, the script will provide the decrypted password. Now, once we have a set of AD credentials we can use for further enumeration, this is just one example of recovering credentials from configuration files. If you are ever able to gain a foothold on a host, make sure to use or make sure to follow a detailed and refined methodology to ensure that you recover all loot from the host, including credentials and other sensitive information stored in configuration files. Okay, so we needed to provide it with this information here, this auth passive value. Now we needed to go back into this SQL SQLite Explorer thing and flip over to the browse data tab, and we're looking for the auth passwd value. So let's go ahead and scroll over to get that value. There we go. This auth user, by the way, svcav. So let's go ahead and right click and copy, and then let's go back over, plug it in here like so. Okay, and that should be it. And we are getting an error message. Awesome. So I may need to use this new one. All right. Now it looks like the newest version worked properly, right? Using Python 3, and I can see the decrypted password, my strong password. All right. So now let's go answer some questions. What type of files contain stored credentials on host, configuration files? What is the name of the McAfee database that stores configuration, including credentials used to connect to the orchestrator? That's going to be ma.db. And what table in this database stores the credentials of the orchestrator? That's going to be agent underscore repositories. What is the username of the AD account associated with McAfee service, svcav? What is the password of that account? My strong password! Exclamation point. And task number 8, conclusion. A significant amount of attack avenues can be followed to breach AD. We covered some of those commonly seen being used during a red team exercise in this network. Due to the sheer size of the attack surface, new avenues to recover the first set of AD credentials are constantly being discovered. Building a proper enumeration methodology and continuously updating it will require to find that initial pair of credentials. Mitigations. In terms of mitigations, there are some steps that organizations can take. You got user awareness training, limit the exposure of AD services and application online, enforce network access control, NAC, enforce SMB signing. By enforcing SMB signing, SMB relay attacks are not possible. Following the principle of least privilege, very important here. Now that we have breached AD, the next step is to perform enumeration of AD to gain a better understanding of the domain structure and identify potential misconfigurations that can be exploited. This will be covered in the next room. Remember to clear the DNS configuration. And that is all, folks. All right. Hopefully you all followed along, took notes, and enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video and got some kind of value out of it, be sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe. All right, it helps out the channel, helps get the word out there, helps grow our glorious community. As always, thank you all for watching. I will see you later.